You're a boxing fan as well.
Huge boxing.
Really?
But I box as well.
You never talked about... I couldn't find anything, but I knew you were a fan. I didn't know you...
Well, I just gave a big lecture on Ali Frazier in Pakistan.
Yeah, okay, we'll talk about that also.
I met Ali when I was 5 years old.
Did you,
Yeah, in
Malaysia, did you happen to see Jake Paul and Anthony Joshua? Do you know?
Yeah, I saw it. I think boxing is so terrible now. Lah.
It is, bro.
So awful. So awful.
So you actually watched the whole fight?
Yeah.
What did you think?
I even watched Yusuf Azmi and what's his name?
Yunus. I didn't watch that one.
But Yunus had a very interesting thing at the end. He did a Ali on Yusuf Azmi. He didn't throw that punch. Ali didn't throw the final punch on Foreman either. You want? I can do a whole podcast on boxing or football.
I think back then you didn't see much of. I guess you could see reactions, right? But comments are not as visible as they are today, right? Because social media, and I find combat sports, the comments, the fans, right? They're the worst people.
No, they're the worst. I mean, I think thank God we didn't have comments.
Yeah.
Because we had great commentators.
Yeah.
You had Howard Cosell, and then you'd have some of the great old boxers sitting down there and viewing fights. If you started to have the crowd, literally the crowd, comment on what was going on, what worth would there be?
Yeah. Which is the comments that you see nowadays.
Precisely.
Yeah. And what's even more messed up is some of these comments happen to get the most likes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say before I introduce, like, a lot of people talking a lot of shit about Yusuf Azmi. I, as always, as someone who's just a huge fan of the sport, right?
Yeah.
Respect to any man who steps in the ring.
He's very brave.
That's number one. He is much older as well.
And anyone who steps into a ring knows that they can die, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not very... Even if you don't die, risk of getting seriously injured is very, very high.
Very high, yeah.
Yeah. In fact, boxing has had a couple of deaths already, yeah.
Well, when you go into boxing, it's... what happens to your physique is incredible, right? Because the first thing you suffer from is dehydration. So your body, just loses all this water.
You're talking about cutting weight or...
No, once you're in the ring.
Oh, okay.
When you box, each round is about what? 4 minutes? Something
3
like
minutes.
3 minutes, yeah. It seems very short.
Yeah.
But my God, when you're there and you're dehydrated and then your blood pressure rises, on top of that, you have somebody whacking you and you whacking somebody.
Yeah.
It's very intense. You're really pushing your body to the limit.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing. And for endurance, I don't believe at all that boxing should be banned or, we should stop being such a nanny state. If people want to push themselves to that level, let them,
There is this saying, right, from he's a former UFC champion, Michael Bisping. Feeling exhausted in the ring is the loneliest feeling in the world. Not in the ring, in the cage. For him, he was a UFC fighter. But yeah, that there was once he got in his amateur career, he got badly beaten up because it was a 6 rounds kickboxing fight. By the 3rd round, he was exhausted, but he had to keep on going. And that taught him a valuable lesson, which made him work on his cardio. And he never had cardio issues after that already. Because it's the fear. Like they say most fighters, they don't fear getting knocked out, or they do fear getting knocked out. But what's a bigger fear to them is being exhausted.
Yeah.
And unable to defend
yourself.
Yeah. Okay,
exactly.
Come, let's... Eddin, thank you so much for coming to this podcast.
Very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
I got to thank Professor Tajuddin as well for connecting us. Yeah. Eddin, please, do you mind introducing yourself and what you do?
Yeah, well, my name is Eddin Khoo. I'm a writer. I'm a journalist, among very many things, but essentially that is my profession. So I will introduce myself in that way, I suppose.
I think for a lot of people of my generation who perhaps have no idea who your father was, just to give you all a picture of how well recognized and respected he was, Emeritus Professor Tan Sri, Dr. Khoo Kay Kim, he has 4 titles in his name. So yeah, maybe that can give you an idea of how well respected he was, and he's also known as our national historian.
Yeah, I think he's best known now to everybody by the road named after him, Jalan Professor Khoo Kay Kim.
I play pickleball on that street.
Right.
Yes. So the only connection I have with your father, perhaps your late father, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell me about, like, did you feel immense amount of pressure, like to not take over, but to follow his footsteps, and talk about your upbringing.
Yeah, I don't consider myself as following his footsteps. I think a lot of us, because of who he was generationally, I think that's very important as well. Look, my father wanted to be a footballer. That was his biggest dream. And he was a very good one. He was a midfielder who could kick with both legs. And I remember when I took up football, his first lesson to me was, learn to be able to kick with both legs. And I think that was my father's philosophy, and what my father admired most in life was versatility, the ability to improvise, and the ability to play games with the world,
Be creative.
Be creative. So I must say, he raised me and my 2 brothers. We're all rather unconventional in that none of us studied law or accountancy or engineering or
Doctor.
or became a doctor. Not that he would ever have stopped us, but my youngest brother is a very well-known dancer and a choreographer.
It's Rubin, is it?
Maven.
Maven.
He's been based in London for the past close to 30 years. He's now with one of the top 10 dance companies in the world. And he started dancing when he was 8 years old, really. And, my father was very encouraging. My family was very encouraging. And then there's Rubin, my second brother, who's been a journalist and a magazine editor for so long, who's really into fashion. And for a short while was Hanayo's press secretary. So yeah, he always allowed us a great deal of freedom to choose the destinies that we wanted. And for an academic, I must say my father had very little regard for book learning.
Book learning?
Book learning, yeah. What he called book learning. As a historian, for example, he was very fond of, his ethos really on history was to find things from original sources, what he called primary sources. So he hardly depended on, of course he was very familiar with the literature of history, but he hardly ever depended on books for references. He went to newspapers, and he went to documents, and he went to agreements, and he went to letters, because he wanted to understand what was that first impulse of history. I have a very interesting story, if I can, about him. I think this just encapsulates.
Please do share.
Some years ago, he loved to speak to young people, and he was very good with young people. My father is a lot better with people than I am. My father's very interactive, and he can traverse all generations. And so he was in this room with about 400 very young people. And there was one boy who got up and asked him, Professor, what would you consider as the most and important and first source of history? And my father's reply was kind of caustic, but also very true. He said, well, the first source of history is gossip. If you can understand the gossip of that time, you can understand what was the zeitgeist and what was the worldview of that time, what people placed importance on, how they perceived each other. And I think that's a very important source of history. So he was that kind of very unconventional, very eccentric historian. Yeah.
What was the most important contribution that your father has given to our country?
I think my father's most important contribution was the fact that he never cared about contributions. In fact, when everybody was quarreling about, the contribution of this community and that community to nation building and towards the nation, he took on a very fundamental or quintessential historical role. And he said, well, history doesn't care about contributions. It only acknowledges roles. What role did you play? What role did you play? And what role did he play? Contributions are value-driven. They give a sense of a certain kind of martyrdom to communities or individuals about how great they are. Whereas history doesn't acknowledge all of those things. It only cares about what did you do and what did you do and what was the outcome, right? So I think if you asked me what was my father's greatest contribution, I would say that his greatest contribution was to not acknowledge contributions, but to really recognize the place of roles and functions in the course of history.
How does one become a historian?
In his case, by mistake.
Not just your father, I guess anyone lah, in general.
Well, some people can fall in love with the subject, of course.
But also do share about how your father...
Yeah, my father wanted to be a footballer. And he was very good. And he could have played for the Malayan youth team. He already played for all Malaya universities or something like that.
The state teams
Asian
also.
state teams and things like that. But of course, there was not much of a future. And my father went to university in 1955 on the cusp of independence. So again, they began to discover a new role for a new generation. So how does a person become a historian? By default, like Papa, or through love? But if you asked me at a very metaphysical, existential level, I suppose you become a historian according to destiny.
Do you complete a course in history that makes you actually a qualified historian?
Yeah, I think maybe somehow we in this country place a lot more importance on that than should be. I think there is a role for what you called what you call professional historians, people who go do degrees, do PhDs, and so on. There's a place for local historians, of which there are many now. There are a place for popular historians. Journalists are also historians in many ways. There are academic histories, there are scholarly histories, there are specialist histories, there are popular histories. And then there is that wonderful terrain of myth, which is also a kind of history, which I have been involved in for many years in my research on ritual arts, on wayang kulit, on mak yong. That's a kind of history too. I was not a student of history. I was a student of philosophy. And it was very interesting to be in university and learn that philosophy is the mother of all subjects and history is the father of all subjects. And the combination of both is so crucial and critical. So how is a historian made? I suppose first and foremost through a great deal of interest, through acknowledging that you can never run away from history, and then by putting in all the effort to research and document and write, that makes a historian.
Okay, the reason why I asked, because I had this idea that it might have been a thing among historians where some would gatekeep certain information and they only would accept it if you had a professional degree. And I thought this was something that most historians agreed on. And that's why hearing your answer is like very refreshing to me.
I think a lot of that goes on. I think there's a lot of vocational pride.
Yes.
So like Freemasons, specialists are all like Freemasons, okay? They have secret handshakes and they have... I think my father was very different. He was he tried to straddle all these roles. And remember, he grew at a time... my father was one of the first historians to appear on newspapers, for example. Give public...
Sorry, did you say he was not? Or?
He was one. He was one of the first of professional historians attached to a university who, for example, wrote in newspapers, spoke to newspapers, took a very important part in public discourse. So he, I suppose, could be one of those you regard as a public intellectual, one of the first in this country. But he realized that you had to break through the ivory tower, and you had to actually engage a lot with the public. If you claim that his history is so foundational to the evolution and growth of a society, then of course you must be interactive. If you choose to be so protective of your vocation, then what is the point? One of Papa's very early contributions, a very interesting essay that I'm going to republish, is an essay on teaching history. How is history conveyed in schools to students? Not in universities, but in schools. And this remained an interest of him all the while. In my work in journalism, I'm a living historian. I record, I comment, and in my years in journalism in the 1990s, it was a very, very different tradition. I was very fortunate to enter journalism at that time, where you were still rooted in old school methods before the coming of the internet, before the coming of social media. And I was trained by very, very good reporters in what was a very marvelous newspaper called The Star. Whether or not, we were somehow circumscribed by politics and by edicts and, laws and all these kinds of things, different. I'm talking about the journalists that I used to interact with, you see, what their culture was. And the philosophy of journalism then was you work on your legs. Your legs must be on the ground. Otherwise, it's not credible. Today, a lot of journalism is done over email. Can you answer these questions for me? Well, that's not the point of the interview. The point of the interview, especially if you, for example, talk to someone like Dr. Mahathir, is to be able to look him in the eye, you see.
Sort of like a podcast
now. and to kind of understand what kind of ride he's taking you on, because he's always doing that. He can say like 6, 7 contradictory things in one interview. You want to get a feel of the personality, right? Of course, now today in journalism, it's a lot easier.
Sorry to stop you, but do you mind elaborating? What do you have a example of what do you mean? He's contradictory statements.
Yeah, for example, I interviewed Dr. Mahathir about 2 years ago on Wawasan 2020. He started out, eulogizing what Wawasan 2020 was, how it was one of the most visionary, progressive things the country has ever known. And then I dragged Wawasan 2020 into things he was saying today that were highly exclusive to Malays, right? The Malay community. And then he defended what he said. And then I dragged back what he was saying today to Vision 2020. And then he just looked at me and said, well, Vision 2020 wasn't really my idea.
Why did he say that?
Well, because he's on the ball, Dr. M is like a jazz musician. He's always changing keys and things like that. So, I could, of course, then be very annoyed and think, liar and you're full of... No, but that's a tactic, you see. So I'm very excited and I would be more disappointed if he didn't do that, actually. And if he just took one line. But, we are not interested anymore in these contradictions and complexities and strategies. We just want an answer that apparently gives you a resolution to very difficult questions just like that. That is uninteresting and that is dull and boring. And it's also a delusion. There's no such thing. People are doing at least 4 or 5 things in their lives all the time that are contradiction with one another. And that's the thing you want to try and get your hand on the pulse of, especially if you're a journalist who's interested more in the questioning, in the drama, in drawing out character, and making history in a Shakespearean kind of sense, than if somebody just gave you a one-line answer to something. But having said that, we also live in different times.
Yeah.
Politicians in the 1990s, in the 1980s, 1970s, and far beyond that, are a lot more interesting than the politicians of today. So one of the reasons why you can get away with an email interview is if you sit in front of this guy or this person or this woman, you're never going to get all those interesting things anyway. So let me just get it over email, I suppose. So
you mentioned about different times that we are in, how journalism has changed so much. A lot of different mediums that people are using. There's no more on the grounds. What do you think is happening to journalism right now?
I think it's just become a slave to technology. So it's pretty automated, right? I have, and please don't get me wrong, as I'm an aging person who's now like just out of time, and no, I think they're very, very serious, empirical examples of the fact that journalism is dying as an art and a craft. We are becoming slaves to social media. Social media is not public opinion. It is mostly mad opinion, okay? And it is a place of pirates. And it is not democratic, because I think a lot of this stuff is actually choreographed and curated by unseen, machinations behind. So I think it's very dangerous for our democracy.
So, you say journalism is sort of like has become a slave to social media, which in a sense that means a slave to the traction, to the views.
Yes.
But journalism back in those days as well, you guys were also looking for traction. Is that correct? Like
Yeah,
the best
in terms
journalists
of newspaper sales, is it?
Sure, yeah. So what's different and so much worse about today?
I think the humanness, the humanity of things, that is lost. When I was in the 90s, what was the greatest menace to journalism, so-called menace to journalism, was the paparazzi.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay. Today we don't have the paparazzi.
We still do.
No, everybody is the paparazzi today.
They could be.
Yeah, that's the difference, you see. Whereas I never condone what the paparazzi used to do, but you required a certain kind of skill, If you were paparazzi, you required a certain kind of skill in the way you held a camera, in the way you ambushed people, in the way you drove a motorcycle, okay, to try and get the best picture. It's led to a lot of ugliness, of course, but still, it demanded a lot from you. Today, you just whip out your handphone and take a celebrity coming out, and celebrity doesn't even have the energy to care very much anymore. Also,
you've been a journalist for decades.
33 years.
33 years. Did you ever have to do any of that? The paparazzi sort of methods? Or is it always arranged meetings and interviews?
Always arranged meetings.
Okay.
I didn't go down that line.
I don't know how journalism was like back then. I thought maybe, sometimes there were ambush interviews or something also.
Sometimes, yeah, well, you would ambush politicians. You ambush Dr. Mahathir all the time,
You still see that now, actually, right?
Yes, you do. Yeah. And, our journalistic culture is very interesting because Dr. Mahathir was like that. He always allowed reporters to approach him. He was very approachable.
He liked it.
And you could ask him questions. He could sometimes be very sarcastic and caustic. So it seemed like your uncle was especially grumpy today. But he always allowed it. I never realized how much that was special until you covered people elsewhere. In Indonesia, for example, you could never do that to Suharto, you see. His bodyguards would manhandle you.
Yeah.
You'd never get that close to Lee Kuan Yew to just ask him a question off the cuff. In Thailand, that would never be, they would like trip your leg and,
Yeah.
kind of. Whereas here, we took it for granted. And because Mahathir led the way, all other politicians were also very, very accessible. It wasn't like that in every other country, you see.
What about pre-Mahathir?
Yeah, no, we've always had that tradition because Tunku was like that also. Tunku would come down the plane and then, reporters would mob him. Yeah. And then he'd make some funny remark like, I'm the happiest prime minister in the world. So we have had that culture. I think we have to be very grateful for it. I think one of the things that I find both painful, sad, and at the same time funny about Malaysians is how we are always woeing and moaning about the fact that, everything's going to come to an end here. When actually, things are not great, but they're not as bad.
Who do you mostly hear that from? Because I'm just about to bring this up. I would say mostly you hear that from the Chinese people, that things are coming to the end. Most of the time, is it in today's time? If they're
I
talking
think I hear
about
it
that?
from everybody. And I think I hear it most from retired old people who helped create a system that they now want to change. And they are wondering where it all went wrong, when a lot of them were actually involved in where it all went wrong, right? So, and then they get on WhatsApp groups and, constantly have single sentence solutions for everything in the country. But as I said earlier, I think it's very important. Sometimes I don't know, maybe it's a kind of karmic philosophy that I hold on to very firmly. But somehow I don't think anything good can come out of anything. So I'm always more interested in, what's the drama of it? What does it tell me about humanity? And what does it tell me about human nature and behavior? Maybe that's my philosophy student training lah.
Which is a big appeal of history.
Yeah,
the drama.
Of history, of philosophers, of people of the humanities. What is human behavior? So I'm less woeful because I don't expect anything better, you see.
We are actually living in the best times. This is a fact, right?
I thought the best times would be, I think the best time would be if I were Jack Kerouac in the 1950s, we're not a shit about anything. Well, Jack Kerouac is a wonderful writer who wrote a great book called On the Road. And he was part of the Beat generation.
Did you say 90s or 1900s?
1950s.
1950s, okay.
Yeah, late 40s, after the war, 1950s. I suppose when you come out of World War II and you realize the brutality of everything that has happened, you c'est la vie lah, that is life, and you give yourself to life. And I think I'm very bohemian. I love a bohemian. I lead a bohemian life. I've always believed in a bohemian life. I believe in individual liberty and freedom more than anything else. But that individual liberty and freedom, needs to be harnessed with self-discovery and reading and, self-construction and deep individuality. So, yeah.
Yeah. You were a 1969 child.
Yes. 5 months and 1 day after May 13th.
Your father was 1937. Was born in 1937, a couple of years before the war. And 20 years before independence. So I've heard a couple of times from some podcast guests, people around your age, they talk about times where they were growing up where people mixed around more freely back then among races. As compared to today, we are much more silo. On social media, of course, that's the way it seems. In person, not... I don't feel that as much on social media, of course. But I also did hear your father say, if I'm not mistaken, I think he did mention that when he was growing up, the races did not mix as freely as what people today make it out to seem. Did he tell you much about how it was like actually growing up pre-independence?
Look, I refuse to be sentimental about these things, because they operate at so many different levels. I'm a post-69 child. I went to national school. I went to a mission school, actually, that La Salle PJ, that was absorbed into the national system. I think there were great advantages to that. People believed in nation building after that shock, you see. So it was irrespective of what class you were, what race you were, you sent your children to national schools because you realized we needed to interact. My classmate for many years in primary school right into secondary school was a Malay boy. He sat next to me. He came from, I suppose, a working class family. His father was a wireman for LLN. And he sat next to, Professor Khoo Kay Kim's son. We never saw any of those class differences. I still don't.
Did he know who... Sorry,
Of course he did. Because he studied my father's textbook.
Okay.
Okay?
They don't use it anymore, right?
They don't use it. They've not used it
Yeah.
for a very long time.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, but we never saw any of those things, and I'm very privileged to have come from a system like that. I'm not being sentimental, but I think that kind of thing still happens. Look, wherever it is, when people are allowed to get along organically, without the intrusion of systems, without the intrusion of politics, without the intrusion of all this, people will get along. The world is like that. There is no purity in the world. Huh? Everybody has got some stream of blood running into them or not. What more in Malaysia? Somewhere along the line, your great-grandfather may have philandered and, you never know. So I like to use the term, my mother gets very upset with this, but I love the fact that Malaysia is so bastardized, you see. Somewhere along the way you have, all morality aside, that's our reality. That's a reality in Southeast Asia. I think we have great challenges in the way the system has decided to come and classify us and categorize us and give us this sense of misguided identity. But I think people can liberate themselves out of it very easily, especially in Malaysia, because your reality is very bastardized. Huh? You cannot escape from it. I do a lot of work in very rural areas, in particular in Kelantan. I think you would know. Kelantan is one of the most cosmopolitan, open-minded, worldly states there is, okay? For men, women, people of other religion, people from other race. And, it's been one of my great discoveries in my life, actually.
So why do people outside of Kelantan now have the total opposite idea of...
Because they are too lazy to go.
Yeah.
It's very easy to pick up things that you hear from. It's very easy to get paranoid.
Yeah.
It's a very natural thing to be a neurotic, especially in this day and age, when everything seems so apocalyptic and cataclysmic. Do you read Asterix? Asterix comics? Anyone know Asterix?
There's a lady cartoon or something.
No. It's a very famous cartoon. Like
it's
Tata.
Medieval times, right?
Yeah, medieval times. The Gauls. Okay.
Yes.
Like Tata, it's the or Tintin, as people say. One of my favorite cartoons. But the leader of the Gauls, Asterix, is a guy called Vital Statistics. Okay. And Vital Statistics will only come out into the open sky at certain hours to bring proclamations and everything, and then he'll quickly be hurried back into his cave. You know why? Because this great King Vital Statistics is always afraid that the sky is going to fall on his head. Okay, that seems to be modern Malaysia and the modern world today. Okay, we will come out for a short while to say our bit from our cave, but we are afraid the sky is going to fall on our head, so we're going to go back in after we say whatever we say. The country is there for you to experience, Look, past doesn't define Kelantan as it doesn't define Kedah. It has a lot more influence on Terengganu maybe, but there are different cultural reasons for that. But you want to discover what Kelantan is, go there lah.
Yeah.
You want to discover what Kedah is, go there lah, please. Not read what you read in WhatsApp groups and these things are a curse, I tell you. Just yesterday, I spent my entire day cleaning my phone of garbage that people spread around in terms of videos, in terms of pictures, in terms of memes. Just garbage, brother. Okay, now imagine that your life is full of this.
What you need to do is turn off the automatic download feature on
I
your
already
WhatsApp.
do that.
Oh, you do?
I already do that, but it takes up space.
Okay.
But so I decided what to do. I apologize to everybody who included me in these WhatsApp groups, but I've exited. Yeah, because it serves me no end, and at the end of the year, I have to spend an entire day doing this stuff.
Don't be surprised. Some people might take it personal in today's age, which is weird, right?
Very nice to be 57 and not give up.
Yeah. Okay, since we were talking about Kelantan, yeah, you started Pusaka 2002. This was just 20 years ago. When did you first develop your interest in like traditional live performing arts? Is it during your teens, 20s? Or earlier on?
Why don't you ask me the question that you do want to ask me, which is, when did you develop your interest in these Malay things? Okay.
Yes.
I was raised by a Malay. Her name was Rahma. She brought me up. She lived in my house. She raised her children in my house. My father is Chinese of Peranakan lineage, so minority, yeah. And my mother is Indian of Jaffna Tamil lineage, so also a minority, okay. And among the Indian communities, as you know, everyone hates the Jaffna Tamils. And then we were brought this Malay lady who brought me up as her own child. So at home, my home name is Din, D-I-N. And my name itself is, in fact, just the other day we did Sejarah Kita podcast with the Islamic scholar, Professor Osman Bakar. And he talked about the Adin, And then he looked at me and said, yeah, Adin, okay? Which is the way of life, which is my name. So very, very cosmopolitan, kind of messy, chaotic, or worldly home background, thanks to my father and thanks to my mother. So I never saw these kinds of differences. But Malayness, of course, was very obvious on me because this Malay lady would never let me away from her bosom, Malays in those days, they always carry angkat, yeah? And they chum, and their chum is very interesting. They don't use their lips. They breathe you in, okay? Imagine having that as a child. It's just the most miraculous thing. And years after she has died, somehow, in very lonely moments, I get a sense of this thing happening again. So my closeness to Malayness, of course, is very, very erat lah, very akrab, very... and the Malays have always interested me as a very cosmopolitan people.
Let me ask, so you've always been colorblind in that sense. But I assume even you growing up in the 80s, 70s, these traditional arts, right, as for a KL boy, you would struggle to find one of your buddies that are actually also have any interest in this sort of thing. How did you come about?
Yeah, through well, I have to thank Parti Islam for this lah. Even when I was a child, I was introduced to a lot of religion. So I understood a lot about Islam. And very often, one of the things I love most in the world is the salawat Nabi, the praise to the Prophet. And because I could sing it when I was a very young boy, I was taught it. Before I could sing any of hymns or chants or mantras, I was already singing the salawat Nabi, right? And I still do it very well. So I love the melody, I love what it says, I love the gentleness of it. But no, when I was growing up, I was a very upper middle class Bangsa boy. I was very into music. I loved Elvis Presley, and later on, my father's influence. I loved people like Frank Sinatra, and then I got into hippie culture and Bob Dylan and things like that. So, and I played the piano from a very young age. Played instruments. My mother actually wanted me to become a classical musician. So it was a very as much as it was color and religion blind, it was also of a certain privilege. Okay, that when you're in that privilege, you can also be class and religion blind, right? That operates even until today.
I feel like people of this sort of privilege today are kind of allergic to these traditional arts, which is horrible to say.
Yeah, because
but it's the truth.
I tell you what is very sad about this class is that we become white worshippers. A lot of these people become white worshippers, or they take a very politically correct view of things that it comes from the West anyway. It's not interrogative. It's not interrogated. It doesn't really make you relate to your own history and to your own things. And I think the upper middle classes in Malaysia are especially what you will call black skin, white masks, and the white worship is sometimes kind of almost gut wrenching and a bit sickening, the Mem Sahib culture, the Sahib Mem Sahib culture.
What is Mem Sahib?
It's Mem Sahib are what you call, Indian people in the colonial times who would like to be white, would like to be English. They were called Mem Sahibs. You have a lot of these people.
Okay.
The kind of people who I don't speak Malay very well. Kind of types
The
are
Malay
those.
people that say that.
Not only Malay people, other people also. We all went through SPM school. We all can speak bahasa Melayu lah. Jangan bohong dengan saya. And whose entire ambition is basically to go and live in the West. Okay? And then from the West, start to have very kind of post-colonial views about everything. It's so complicated. It's such a screwed up psychology, I think, anyway. But no, for me, it was very simple. I also was Western educated. I went to the United Kingdom to study philosophy, but I ended up majoring in Islamic philosophy at a very, very interesting and historical time. Something about a star over us 69 people. But I went to university in 1989, just after the Salman Rushdie issue, just after Tiananmen Square, and just before the fall of the Berlin Wall. Now, imagine to be caught up in that kind of history, right? Just amazing. It made me want to become a journalism. It made me want to travel in a very probing way. It made me love what we would consider idiosyncratic countries, because the first European countries I went to were not France or Germany or Holland. It was Poland and Hungary and Czechoslovakia and Romania and Bulgaria and places like that. Because the wall was coming down then, I was very interested to know, what the fall of communism meant. I was very poor. I didn't have very much money, so you had to do all kinds of things to make travel like this feasible, and use as much as your smarts as possible, right? So it was very, very, very different time. Yeah. So my discovery, we've meandered all over the place. My discovery of the ritual arts of Kelantan is this. When I came back, I became a journalist. I was given the arts and culture beat. So I worked in Kuala Lumpur, reviewing theatre and, going to plays and dance. And I discovered that after 4 months, I was very, very bored with middle-class pretensions in the arts. Some of the arts was very good, of course, but, overall, it was just middle-class pretensions. I also found it very difficult to sit down in a seat for 2 hours or something. No freedom. I couldn't have a cigarette. I couldn't, walk around. And then PAS did me a big favor. They decided to ban everything within their own tradition for being antithetical to Islam. And then I had to go and search for these things.
Yeah, so people, myself included, people who just could not understand, because they are essentially, they banned a traditional form of entertainment in a state where there's not much entertainment. Why would PAS do such a thing?
First of all, it's not entertainment. It is deeply connected to the lives and worldview of the people of Kelantan and the people of Kelantan Patani. It is also ancient. It's very old. It also contains history. It also contains philosophy. It also contains psychology. It contains language. So when you ban all these things, it also contains a lot of information about an insight into things like gender relations, community relations, the place of an individual within community, how an individual relates to community, what comprises an individual's emotions, sensibilities, temperament. So that's not entertainment, brother. That's a whole way of life, right? So for me, the big question is, what happens when you attempt to efface what is a whole way of life of an entire people? What happens is that people get very damaged. And then I ask the question about why you do it. Why would you do this? You would do this because when people do not have all these resources at the center of their being, you are able to replace it. Right? You understand what I'm saying? So you don't have tradition, you don't have healing, you don't have language, you don't have history, you don't have a sense of who you are, you become completely void. And who fills in the void? It's power, it is politics, it is political parties, it is ruling elites, it is religious elites, all fill in that lacuna, right?
Okay.
Scary, isn't it?
Yeah. To simplify that answer, they did it because they can, and because they don't have a better way of control.
Well, they would say they did it for religious reasons and for them to become more pure religious people. What they won't tell you is that once I destroy all of these things, the entire community has nobody else but me.
Understand? Yeah.
Yeah.
That is. Well, it sounds. It just straight up sounds evil, but.
No, I don't use such terms, lah. I think we don't even operate in the realm of good and evil anymore. We just operate in a realm of such horrible mediocrity, and there's something quite grand about being evil. Do you see it around you in our politicians today? All you see is nothingness, really, and that's even more sad, I think, because you can't even battle this. Right? You can't even battle this. The great moral contest between good and evil is a very big one, a grand one. Today it's just nonsense. I mean, it's right. So, but it's very damaging. I've always said it. I've said it many times. I've written about it that, when you go to places like Kelantan and Kedah and other states, everywhere really, even among Chinese or Indians, you'll find older people have a lot more sophisticated approach to the world. Young people have identity politics and victimology, all right, and righteousness. That is very damaging.
So you spend so much time with the people in Kelantan. What do they?
They are my family. Yeah.
Yeah. What do they? What do they think about their past governance?
They think it's ridiculous, of course.
They do.
Of course, yeah. But they are powerless.
But they vote for them.
They've not necessarily. I mean, a lot of, they vote for them, but, it's not like the whole of Kelantan gives 100% vote to pass, right? But in Kelantan, one day you should come with me and you should go and study the politics of Kelantan. It's very, very sophisticated.
I would love to.
A place like Terengganu is very different. It's more ideological. But in Kelantan, it's a lot more sophisticated. And for as much as there's been a ban in Kelantan for all the years that I've worked there, 30 years, 33 years, they've never banned me. I've still been doing the stuff. Mak Yong has still been passed down. Wayang Kulit has still been passed down. Manora is still practiced. Getting a bit more tough now with the younger people.
No, but when you form Pusaka to preserve this tradition, what was the... Sorry?
I didn't form Pusaka to preserve this tradition because that's a very arrogant approach. Who am I to preserve something that is 100 years old? I went it because I was excited. I love the art forms. I wanted to research, document. I wanted to participate in community. That was the reason I went in. Along the way, I worked with many of the great masters, basically to bring about young people, to get them involved. And since then, I think it's was very ambitious, but we've actually been able to do quite a lot of things, like pass down the art forms to a whole other tradition, which in 1992 seemed almost impossible, yeah? We've taken the traditions all over the world. We've done incredible amount of documentation, almost 200 hours of visual documentation. We've energized and raised the interest of young people and a wider community, even in KL. I mean, every time we do performances in Kuala Lumpur, it's totally packed out. So that, I think, is a little of our not success, but what we've been able to bring light to.
Before you got involved, right, I actually watched some of your videos of Mak Yong Wayang Kulit. I see a lot of young kids that participate. Before Pusaka's efforts were there many younger generations? It's just
It was very old people.
Yeah.
Very, well, when I say old, I'm talking about people who are like maybe in their mid-40s or something.
Younger than you.
Yeah, I mean, I was very young then, but
Okay.
But I was in my 20s, 21, 22 years old. But I love the adventure of it. I used to make a drive to Kelantan, overnight drive, So I'll get up in the morning, about 4 in the morning. I will drive 8 hours, 8 to 10 hours to Kelantan. I would do a short interview or something, and then have a short nap in my Tok Dalang's house. He was like my adopted father. He lived in a kampong house in Ketere. Take him for dinner, I have a short nap, and then I drive back at 10 o'clock and then come back to KL at about 6 or 7 and go to work the next day. The adventure of it was just fantastic, And in 1993, 1994, the roads to Kelantan were not like they are now. Now we still complain, but back then, literally had to go through those bridges, those wooden bridges and everything. But oh my God, I love the landscape. I love the way the country unfolded. You take a drive through the Banjaran Titiwangsa into Gua Musang. Oh, it's just the scenery is incredible, the wildness of the country. And then you begin to understand. I began to apply, the country's environment to how it then relates in the old mind to the temperament of the people. All these things happen. It also gave me a chance to, for example, sing songs along the drive, just to keep myself awake. But I love that alone time of 8-10 hours. And then I love that time of community of 6-8 hours. And then the alone time again. So it's a very, very intimate experience for me. It was also my discovery of the country.
Okay. So sort of an escape from the city hustle and bustle as
No,
well?
it's not an escape. There's nothing to escape. I love the city also. I'm a Kuala Lumpur boy. I think I know it. It runs like the blood in my veins, I was always a pemburu kota, a city fugitive, looking at all kinds of things on my own. But this was discovering the bigger country. People always ask me, if you think of Malaysia, what do you think of? I always think of the line, our Rukun Negara, Tanah, Tumpah near Darahku, My blood upon this country. It's the most beautiful, amazing line. And well, what does it mean? It means this you travel,
Yeah, explore.
Yeah, explore.
Yeah. Okay. Previously you mentioned your May 13th, 1969 child. May 13 was one of the most tragic events, the most actually tragic events in Malaysia. I also thought about this, like, May 13 was our most tragic event. In some sort of way, we are lucky that it is only to that extent. If we compare it to the histories of other countries and all, they were much more worse. And even just our neighboring countries like Indonesia, they had more brutal and disastrous sort of massacres. Yeah, but tell me about what actually unfolded that day in 1969, and how did the chaos all erupt? And there are some people today that claim that it was politically orchestrated, and the other side would say that it was organically erupted. What actually happened then?
Okay, I think most people say that it was somehow politically orchestrated.
Most people,
a lot of people, I think, believe it's politically orchestrated. I think politics is not guiltless, okay? But it relates a lot to perceptions, the construction of identity politics, the very cynical approach of political parties, all of them. I don't blame any one political party here. For every political party that points a finger at the other, there's also something to relate them to May 13th, 1969. I think we've not been honest about it. Okay. I think we love to be conspiratorial, and I think that doesn't help. I think politics had a large role to play in whipping up sentiment, in taking what were real truths and facts and exploiting them for political purposes. But I think when the clash came, it was organic. I think racial tensions had become so rooted already. Again, fanned by politics and maybe shaped and defined by politics. But when the clash came, it was organic. It was a combustion. And then politicians themselves were kind of taken aback.
Sorry, were you staying in the...
I wasn't even born. I was born 5 months and 1 day after.
Sorry, was your father staying in the Bangsa area? Or
we were staying in Section 16 PJ. My father was a tutor in University of Malaya, doing his masters. But he does, and my mother, of course. My mother was, for example, and May 13 just didn't happen on that day. It carried on. And on one of those weekends, my mother herself almost got caught in a melee. And so she was expecting me, and she found shelter with in Jalan Tunku Abdul Rahman in a shop that she used to buy saris from or something. But it was sporadic. It continued after a period of time. But they do recall that there were darurat laws, emergency laws. So even when my mother was time to take into hospital, to have me delivered, they had to get police permission and all that kind of thing.
That was 5 months after.
That was 5 months after.
Yeah,
It carried on until Mageran came to a close, right? Yeah.
I heard that a couple of months after that, actually things went back to normal. Just a couple of months after that, like in the city centres, or it was normal, but there was still a lot of restrictions.
No, there was still. I remember that some states never experienced it at all, right?
My father was in Setiawan. He's a Setiawan person.
Yeah.
They really didn't experience any of it.
Kelantan, no, there was none.
Yeah.
Kelantan also got very interesting stories about how Malays would go to Kampung China and barricade the kampung, defending the people there, making sure that there was no trouble, right?
This was during...
It's May 13th, yeah.
Even though... but there was no violence, but
no violence at all.
But there were precautions.
There were precautions. And people were helping each other, to make sure. Places that were bad were... I think Penang was quite bad. KL was the worst, of course. Some breakout maybe in Ipoh, if I'm not mistaken. Some in Johor. But largely confined to the West Coast. East Coast didn't have... I don't think it had any trouble at all.
Okay. So...
But, brother...
Yes.
We must be open about looking at all these things, you see. What I've always found most difficult about May 13th is, first of all, as you said, in the greater scheme, it's a horrible tragedy. Yeah? Even one death in a riot like this is an absolute tragedy, bloody, and... but, Indonesia in 1965, 600,000 people in 5 days in a coup. Thailand, just continues.
In 5 days.
5 days, what? 1 day or 1 week, what? 5 to 7 days. Bodies were in rivers that wouldn't flow because it was full of bodies. Okay. The Khmer Rouge, Cambodia, the Philippines for years under martial law, right? So I think we have to acknowledge that we have a certain kind of community culture that is very civilized and is very averse to violence. But even if the numbers have been reduced in the official report, they certainly weren't that great like this. But it's enough of a lesson. But what we need to do is to be able to interrogate. And what I find very dangerous is the communalization of this episode. So politicians seem to have the right anytime to whip it up. And then other communities who do, for example, I got a book recently, very well done book, very well curated, very well crafted, on May 13th by a Chinese organization. And then I read the book. It was very moving. It was also very truthful in that perspective. But then I came away from the book and said...
What was the name, of the book?
I can't remember.
Is it by...
It's a group that was set up. Published by Gerak Budaya, And I was very moved by it. I was taken by it, And I don't dispute any of the truths of the first-hand witnesses that are found there. But I left the book and suddenly it struck me. I said, there's only one Malay. Okay? There's only one Malay in there. Everybody else is Chinese. And of course, the guys who have put this together are Chinese. And if you were doing it as Malays, you do the same thing. you'd have all Malays and maybe one Chinese.
Wait, sorry, what do you mean by there's only one Malay in there? The one Malay
One Malay character lah is interviewed there. Everybody else is Chinese. Right? So I
they were
say...
interviewing the victims, is it? Or-
Yeah, victims or people who have experienced. So when I think to myself is, hey, look, May 13th was not one race pogrom. It wasn't. It was intercommunal violence. Intercommunal violence. It was not an anti-Chinese pogrom. So as much as we acknowledge and have to acknowledge the Chinese story, there's also the Malay story, there's also the Indian story, and they all have to be represented. You do not take just one community,
Yeah.
even though you do it so well. Even though what you say is in there is all true, I'm sure, or the perception of it is true, where is the balance? May 13th was not, like in Indonesia, for example, Chinese pogrom. We all attacked the Chinese community. It was intercommunal violence. So it has to be represented that way. These are the troubling things, and I'm the young people who did this, for example. I don't blame them. I don't even think they thought about it very much of how we are going to represent May 13th. Okay, and sometimes young people who inherit this, sometimes they're more fervent than the people who actually experienced it. So all these things trouble me, but for as long as you only whip out May 13th to further enhance identity politics or to threaten communities in political rallies, then nobody's going to get a hold of it, you see, and understand what the trauma actually is. It's just being instrumentalized now. And that is, I think, the greatest insult and of the event, you see.
The trauma is greatly preserved and carried on because of politicians instrumentalizing
No,
it.
politics politics is a pollutant lah. It just pervades, and what I'm so troubled by, and which is why I think the work in Kelantan and all is very important, is that increasingly our society is being dispossessed of everything but politics. Right? It seems that we have nothing but politics in our lives. This is less so, of course, in more urban areas. But if you go to places like Kedah, Kedah also got great culture, great history and everything, but being dispossessed all the time. And all young people have there are either mat rempit culture or, ideologic, Puritan, political, religious culture. Societies cannot survive like that.
Coming back to the numbers thing, right? So reported, I think, was less than about 190, is it, if I'm not mistaken?
Close to 200 if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And then some estimates go up to 1,000 and all. And you said that they tried to reduce it. Why do you think they did that?
I didn't say they tried to reduce it.
Okay, sorry.
I didn't say they tried to reduce it. I don't know. If you look at the report and the book that Tunku Abdul wrote, there's a methodology they use. There are lots of things went unreported. And I may be, some people may be very critical of me and say, I don't know why you're so kind to the government. They are just liars and everything. But it's very hard to predict. Very hard to arrive at a very accurate
number
approach. So I think the interrogation of May 13th is always very important. And the figures only tell you so much. I think what we need to interrogate even deeper is the psychology, the emotions, the emotional construct of that time. What was the role of politics? What really, was the politician's role? Who did what? Why did they do it? And very interesting when you talk to the politicians of that time, none of them want to talk about it.
You mean today or?
Today. Politicians living today who were somehow present at that time, I don't know why none of them want to talk about it.
On live or in person also?
No, in person or, yeah, they don't bring it up.
What's your guess? Why they don't?
Well, it's a dark cloud. Nobody comes out of it good. So So our politicians, like, they're all pristine. They've never done anything horrible. But and I think they also were caught by surprise. I really do believe this, that they were caught by surprise. Even if they instigated some group here and there, they never thought it would spread to like this. There are very interesting stories, lah. Like the role of Dr. Ismail in just coming back into government and taking reins of the country. We know him to be a very kind of strict and some would say quite authoritarian leader who had left government at that time, but he came back. Some say at the request of Tun Razak, some say at the instruction of Tunku Abdul Rahman, some say, Tun Ismail just forced himself back, okay, because the country needed to be taken. There are also things like, for example, you must affirm the very positive role played by the military. They were actually invited to come and impose control and take over government. But Chief of the Armed Forces, General Hamid Bidin, at that time refused. Okay, he said we can have emergency council or Mageran, but we're not going to have a military rule. What really annoys or really troubles me, I don't want to use the word annoys, but troubles me, are people who have lived through that. They're now writing books talking about blaming Tun Razak for giving up emergency rule. He should have stayed on, set everything right, brought in the army. Are you out of your mind? Have you? Because again, they have no sense of history at all, right? So they have no sense that just within our region alone in the early 1970s, military dictatorship was one of the very popular forms of government. The Philippines was under military dictatorship. Indonesia was under military dictatorship. Thailand was under military dictatorship. What good came of that? Tell me. Yeah, just brutality, endless brutality. And some of these people, one of them is a man I know. I like him very much, but he wrote a god-appalling book. About 7 things of how Malaysia didn't get right or something. One of them was that we should have continued to have emergency rule. And he blames Tun Razak for being weak, for giving back into parliamentary democracy. Is this man out of his mind?
Who's this person?
He wrote a book, I can't even remember his name now. Datuk Muhammad Hassan or something. I know him, I even interacted with him on this book that he was doing. But I find a lot of this kind of thinking among older people who are part of that, yes sir, no sir, 3 bags, full sir, baba, black sheep generation. Never questioned anything. And then after retirement, the country is going to God knows where and everything. They start blaming everybody and then have fantasies like this. For all the complexity that was Tun Razak, I think the return to democracy was a very admirable thing. Okay, and it wasn't just a return to parliamentary democracy. It was that experiment called Barisan Nasional. Okay, and the 70s, I think, was a time of great resourcefulness for the Malaysian nation. Everything from the new economic policy, whether they all went wrong or whether they were skewed somewhere along the way is a different matter entirely. But that 1970s kind of commitment to rebuilding society, and more importantly, and I'm a product of that 1970s generation, to locate ourselves in empathy. In empathy. Because if we do not have communal empathy, May 13th could well happen again. Very far-reaching, very visionary. The fact that as a result of our perversions of history, we don't actually know what the new economic policy is all about. Right? We don't understand what the Rukun Negara is because we're only given 5 principles, not the entire document. Very cynical. Very, very cynical.
So let's talk about it. So, 1969, what came next was, a year later, was Rukun Negara on Merdeka Day. Your father had the privilege to be involved in formulation of the Rukun Negara. Yes. One of these two terms, right, that were included in the Rukun Negara. Rukun Negara, first of all, it was an attempt to foster unity in a reaction to May 13. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 2 of the terms that were included, liberal and progressive, clearly stated in the Rukun Negara, and somehow, right, this word has become a taboo and actually been demonized by certain politicians. Yeah. How did that happen?
First of all, it's not only, and the Rukun Negara got it from somewhere else.
The Indonesian.
No, the Rukun Negara got the words liberal and progressive from another very principal foundational document in our country, the Proclamation of Independence. Our constitutional independence document contains the word liberal progressive also. But these days we are all purists, you see. So we can only relate, and not only are we purists, we are numbskulls as purists. So we don't even understand that liberal can mean something outside our bedroom. Okay? Liberal values have nothing to do with your sexuality or kind of clothes you wear. It's about things like common good. It's about things like, what is utility. Liberalism is all about that. So when we use the word liberal in our context, we are talking about social attributes. We are not talking about what you do in our bedroom. But it seems that we have become so terkongkong, so made captive by each other's sexual lives. We think that the word liberal only relates to whether you drink beer, what you do in your bedroom, and what your sexuality is. And all our discussions about liberal is about that one.
Yeah, it is.
And I'll tell you another thing is, for all our progressive politicians, nobody dares to take this on and re-explain it. Okay? They also give in and they yield and they cow to this kind of idea rather than explain it and be willing to, take the cudgels and talk about liberalism. They just choose not to want to use the word because they don't want to be demonized. So what kind of worth of politician are we talking about here?
An argument for that, an argument for that is the political system whereby they are incentivized to think short term.
Well, you see, if we were able to explore the entire Rukun Negara, we would be able to interrogate the word liberal. But because we have to take up our right hand, look behind our textbook, exercise book, and then say the 5 principles, that's it. We don't understand anything else about the Rukun Negara. Okay, we don't understand its context, we don't understand its evolution, we don't understand the arguments that were going there. I wrote a book about this, about the making of the Rukun Negara. Because we don't have any of these things, and it has slowly dissipated and been effaced from our collective life since the late 1970s. So we have entire generations brought up on Rukun Negara who only understand these 5 principles behind your exercise book. And then when you ask people, what is the Rukun Negara? They will say, oh yeah, those 5 principles behind the exercise book. That's how they describe it. And then people will ask you, can you recite them? Then they will recite them. This is a recitation of a moron collective lah. This is like you living in the Soviet Union and you come up and do parades on Marxism and communism, all condition, all. Whereas the broader thing, so we've never introduced, and recently the Minister of National Unity tried to bring up Rukun Negara again in Parliament. What did most of the parliamentarians do? They focused again on how can we be liberal, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the big argument.
I know I did not take note of that, but that's very, I guess not surprising lah, but it's quite crazy to hear.
No, but brother, what really is, why is then no further deliberation on this kind of psychosis?
Is it because they are not capable of it, or deliberately
yeah, that's why I say you want to talk about this as evil? This is just mediocre and nothing, man. Right? Not even evil. It's not even worth anybody saying anything. Sometimes I think it's just that also. Why don't you deliberate? Because what's the point? This is the guy sitting in Parliament. Some mutt from God knows where. You just despair, right? You just despair. It's that bad. It is really that bad. And it's everywhere in the world now. I don't know. It's a question of collective pedagogy, education, and also tired of, when people talk about education, all just talking about education system and textbooks. There's a larger conversation about public education. And you know why I'm so obsessed with this? Because I grew up with these things. This was the approach of restructuring our society in the 70s. Hari ini dalam sejarah, introduced in 1974, 1975. You may call it propaganda, but if you look back on it, wow, quite good, man, those days. Not bad, you know. Rukun tetangga, all this, we may laugh, okay? But it was a way of bringing society together and interrogate about each other, you see. Felda settlements were not monocultural settlements. They were not just full of Malays. They followed the quota, 70, 30 and whatever, you know. There were many Indian families that went to Felda settlements, many Chinese families that went to settlements. They're all documented there in our photographs and all that. But who goes on search for all these things?
So it's a year after Rukun Negara, we've got the NEP implemented. Why do many people think that the NEP is a race-based policy?
Because they are conditioned to believe that. They don't have any other education about the NEP.
What about that time, during that time period?
The NEP was drawn up. I made this mistake on Sejarah Kita just a few weeks ago by referring to the man who drew up the NEP as Jules Fontaine. Jules Fontaine was
a French footballer.
He was a French footballer. But the one who drew it up was Jules Fallen, a Norwegian. With advice from all kinds of people. One of my favorite philosophers in the world, political philosophers, his name is John Rawls. John Rawls refers to the NEP as a very equitable form of social restructuring.
Where was it? So the NEP was actually emulated from a system that was used in other countries, is it?
I think it was pieced together. The whole making of the NEP itself is a very interesting. And there was input from one of the people who gave input was an American political scientist called Samuel Huntington. But a whole group of people, local people, Tan Sri, Rama Iyer, were very important. So it was the making of the NEP. I think that's going to be another of my small books, how the NEP actually came about. But it was to address pembasmian kemiskinan, eradication of poverty, irrespective of race. And so everybody was addressed. Somewhere along the way, it seemed to become a political party largesse, right? And along with all these perversions, people wonder now that our politics is so, mad, and there's no respect for anything, fundamental things like the rule of law. You're challenging top judges who come up with very good decisions. There seems to be no rootedness in the rule of law or on due judicial process. Everything is about victimology, and you are trying to get me and I'm trying to get you. It's a very actually terrifying psychological state to be in, because there is no truth. You can fantasize. What has a court judgment got to do with a man's contributions to a society? It can mitigate, perhaps, sentencing, but if a crime has been committed, right? So where is this? And you're getting like top lawyers and all that also indulging in this fantasy. It's very dangerous to a society. I'm not referring to any particular kind of case.
You're not?
No, I'm not. But it's a psychosis. I don't think we can look at Malaysian society very much empirically anymore. We need to look at it in psychological realms, in the play of politics and things like that. We are going to edit this conversation, right?
How?
Okay. Yeah, for sure. Okay, because I'm going all over the place. So
No. I won't edit.
Sorry?
I won't edit. I believe this is what people, they would love to hear. No, I mean...
Vishnu, it's up to you.
No. Like I was saying just now, I listened to your father, some of his speeches, talking in public speaking, and he would be amazing on podcast today.
Mm-hmm,
and
I think so. Great storyteller.
Yeah, and I do believe yourself as well. You are great on podcasts, and you should do it more if you have the time, because there's not many people like you. And honestly, it's... If people take the time to listen and all, I think they can learn a lot, like just from listening. And I hope that more and more people do. Yeah. What was I talking about?
NEP. That's what we were talking about. The NEP. I think all these things, Brian, if I can just pull the threads together, because we have meandered all over the place. put all the threads together is we are really talking about kind of public education, pedagogy. We are talking about collective culture. The whole idea of I never believed in a nation anyway. I'm not one of those people. I'm politically, I like to describe myself as an anarchist in my head. I don't believe in government. I think it only brings dread and horrible stuff to people because it is rooted in power, and power always just corrupts, and as we know, corrupts absolutely.
Is there an example that you admire?
I admire Gandhi a great deal. Not without qualification. Gandhi was quite mad. He did a lot of mad things.
Yes, sir.
Right? But I think he was really a radical and a rebel. He had his own prejudices. He was bedeviled with all kinds of doubts and prejudices and things like that. He fought against caste, but really was a casteist. He was bad at sex, and so he practiced celibacy by sleeping naked with his nieces and all these weird things. Okay, he was. If you read my autobiography of Gandhi, My Experiments with Truth, you would find the most radical things about how the world should go back to small communities. You should grow your own plants. These are all things today, right, for environment. At the same time, about his problems with bowel movements and things like that, all in the same.
The question is, did he actually sleep with them, or did he?
No, I mean he just lay there naked. But
that's what he said. There's no reason to not believe.
I think he was incapable, seriously. But that's quite beside the point. I mean, you're dealing with someone who's very eccentric, you see. So you're going to be dealing with a muddle, but you have to explore it in the totality. You have to take away his ideas, like his books too. When you read that Experiments with Truth, it's really quite crazy, okay? And only an Indian could write this, okay? Because only an Indian would suffer from all these kinds of issues. His marriage, his children. But he also had such resonant ideas for our world today. How do we make our own clothes? How do we grow our own crop? How do we trade without money? Increasingly very important questions today, right? So I think way ahead of his time. He didn't believe in nations either. He believed in an independent India, but he believed within an independent India, you needed to have so many independent kinds of communities. He lived with the poor, but loved the luxuries of the rich. Okay, we all know this. But that's not to demonize the man and say he's, just a liar and whatever not. He was living through, and he never wanted to be called Mahatma. You call him that, he takes it, that's a different matter. He never declared himself that. But so he's my example, I think, of who is a very resonant figure today, if we are able to work through all these difficulties. But we are more obsessed about his naked sleeping than about his ideas on it says a lot about us, right?
Yes.
And our voyeuristic kind of Puritan culture.
And I don't think this is something new. This is something new to just this generation.
No, I think it's
been like that.
I don't know where this surge of medieval Puritanism is coming from. We live in the age of the Scarlet Letter. I think horrible things happen in terms of sexual violence and sexual exploitation. But I think we've also got to be very clear about coming down very heavy on those kinds of things, and yet not coming up with a self-righteous Puritan culture. Okay,
I definitely have to talk about this because you were a former chairman of the UEC board, and this is a political issue that has been ongoing for decades. I think there's been a resurgence last decade, right? So for most people, right, they probably understand it on my level. I went to public school. I had many friends in SJKC, none of which went to private Chinese school. I think today they've lumped everything together. Chinese school, SJKC's vernacular, UEC. People just lump it all together. What is the whole issue with this UEC? The UEC is an exam where people in independent Chinese schools, private Chinese schools, have to sit for. The questions that most people would ask is, what is the issue that political parties have with it. Is BM not a subject, or if it is a subject, is the standards not up to par? These are some of the questions I think most people would be curious about in understanding this issue.
I feel like Hanuman leaping over the Indian Ocean from one thing to another, but I like this kind of discursive, wild conversations.
That's why I think you're great on podcasts, and I see like the ones that you do with BFM and all. They're good as well, but it's a different sort of pleasure that people enjoy when they listen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know whether you listen to long podcasts as well.
I do listen to long podcasts. I like them. They're very soothing.
I love listening to long podcasts, and I believe there's it's different now. You know, there's a time. It's more leisure also sometimes. Yeah.
Well, the UEC is a very, very misunderstood issue, controversy, and at the heart of it, of the UEC, is race relations. Let's not be coy about it. Okay, it is the fact that there are certain sectors in our country that are so racially obsessed that the be-all and end-all is the racial demonization of somebody else. The real issue is just a very technical one. You know, should students who take this UEC examination, which is an independent examination, but it's a Malaysian examination, but an independent one, that has gone through various stages of evolution. But at this given time, not in 1975 when it was first introduced, not in 2014 or whatever it is, when all those weird things that they were teaching in their weird and erroneous things that they were teaching in their textbooks, that Muslims pray 3 times a day, not 5, that imams are women, and I think their pilgrimage to Medina rather than Mecca, something like that. No, it's just crazy. Okay, it was just crazy. Written by experts apparently. The textbooks since then are very good.
2014 post, right?
Yeah, whichever that period was, that there was all this uproar about it. And your experts, what kind of experts don't know that Muslims pray 5 times a day? You can complain about the azan being too loud, but you don't realize how many times that azan is being sounded, is it? So I don't understand where all this comes from, and you call these experts. But post that, I must say, I've been through as UEC Chairman, I've been through the textbooks, history textbooks in particular, very, very good. And what model do they follow? They follow the model of history textbooks during my period of time. Start off with national history, move into regional history, right? And then go into world history over 3 years. So their textbook today follows that model, okay? But really the issue is a technical one. Can students who do UEC enter public universities, and then enter the civil service? And what are the mechanisms to do so, if they can be? Right now, they are not allowed to. So can we find a way in which they can be allowed to? Yeah, we can. That's what the UEC committee was about. And so when I took it on, I think this is very important.
Sorry, when was your role?
2018.
For how long?
It went on till 2020, until the pandemic.
2 years? Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. But, when I went in there, I decided nobody cares very much about committees. We have a gazillion of them operating, God knows what, everything from halal certificates to toothbrushes. We have committees about everything, health and all that kind of thing. So I said, but committees are very important things. In many mature democracies, committees have kind of autonomy that many other bodies don't have. So I wanted, when I went and saw the Minister of Education at the time, Mazli Malik, and I like Mazli. I think he was a very, very good Minister of Education. People had problems with his eccentricities and things, but if a country cannot take a person's eccentricities, even as he has very good ideas and very it says a lot about our society, right? What are your preoccupations really? Can you imagine if Winston Churchill lived today with his idiosyncrasies, right? Walking around naked and things like that. But the brilliance is there, whether he was a racist or not. And that's another thing that we have to do. Anyway, but there was a lot of complaints on Mazli about his eccentricities and, wanting to have black shoes. Well, I was a student who had to polish his bloody white shoes every single day. I would have given everything black shoes. Okay? But he was very focused on the student. What works best for the student? What removes a lot of burden from the student? And so he created this committee. And the first thing I told him was, we have to create a whole different kind of committee culture. He gave me 3 months to do this. I said, you must be crazy, because I'm not going to sit there with 2 of my colleagues in one room provided by the Minister of Education and then come up with our own theories. No, I'm going to go out there like the democratic committees do in democratic countries. You meet everybody and you bring them together, which we did. We met 93 groups, individuals, 93 of them. They ranged from ISMA, the most extreme right-wing Malay group, to Tongshong, considered the most extreme Chinese group. We met all of them. We brought them together in a town hall. We brought young people together in a town hall. And my greatest disappointment was the system itself.
At the same time, you all brought them
At the same time, yeah.
Okay.
The system itself couldn't understand what we were trying to do. Right? So we had provocateurs all the time. And they were not ISMA or they were not Tongshong. It was politicians. Right?
You mean during the session?
No, during the entire course of the committee, right? Politicians going and double speak, one thing to the Chinese media, another thing to the national media, going in, disturbing the things, making stupid remarks, one of whom was the Deputy Minister of Education at that time from the DAP. Okay, a loathsome politician. And I'll say this to you, and you can publicize it as much as you want. It's because of people like her who speak with very forked tongues that this issue continues to be politicized.
Who was this lady?
Tioni Cheng. Okay? Just a provocateur throughout. And if you ask me, you want to play this kind of politics, then you are a racialist. Right? And she was Deputy Minister of Education, who should be giving support and explicating what the committee, because we are constantly in conversation with the ministry, right? Rather than doing that, she goes and stokes flames all over the place. To the Chinese press, say one thing to the Chinese press, say another thing to the English press, And politicians like this have to understand they're servants of the people. And as far as the committee is concerned, right, you take my advice. I'm not going to listen to you, because you have a particular kind of position. We don't have that culture, you see. So as much as we had Reformasi, we overthrew UMNO, and, where was the change in political culture? You still had minion, pygmy politicians like this, believing because they have that title, all of a sudden they are way above every kind of democratic culture and so on. So yeah, it was very disappointing. I think the committee did very good work. We are still waiting to hand in the report that nobody wants to receive because it has a solution. Okay?
And what is the solution?
Well, the solution for me, we didn't have a consensus, but I've said this many times. For me, very simple. Bahasa Malaysia credit is non-negotiable. Non-negotiable. If you want to enter public university in Malaysia and you do your SPM, STPM, credit in Bahasa Malaysia is non-negotiable. And I'm getting very weary and tired of people who really have no respect for the national language. It's getting very wearisome. People who cannot speak it, and have contempt sometimes, actually. Many of them live today in London and Paris, and they live in Chicago or whatever it is, where they have no problem speaking English for anything. Okay, but they will never concede to talking Malay, or although they've been through SPM, whatever not. So it's again that black white mask thing, you see. So for me, it's credit in Bahasa Malaysia, and then let's take the issue of these contentious subjects: history, tata negara, okay, civics. Put it all together in one entrance examination and be done with it, right? Don't burden the students with one non-entry and having to do double tracking. They do double tracking, do one UEC examination, do SPM at the same time. Get rid of all of that stuff. In those days we had something called the general paper.
They do both.
They do both. Yeah, they do double tracking. Okay, but another thing I want to emphasize is this. So that's my solution. I think it's very reasonable, don't you think? Okay, but this one don't want to accept.
That's the one I wanted to ask. Like, let's say the non-negotiable credit for a BM. Dongshong was opposing that.
They are fine with that, but it's not sufficient. Because there are other issues, you see, that are of concern. How you teach history, how you teach, what do you know about the country, its structure, it's all this kind of thing.
Can I just say, like, was it ever brought up, like, why don't they just follow exactly the syllables all as
Because they want their own autonomy. Fair enough lah. I mean, because you also have, in our...
What is different from their
Brother, look,
curriculum?
we are also insulating everything. This is another thing I told Dr. Mazli is this. UEC is not just about UEC. Again, go back to the 70s. When I was in the 1970s, going to national school, I went to mission school. Mission schools surrendered themselves to the national education system. So did the Chinese schools. Okay? Except for the Chinese independent schools. But back in my time, national schools were of such a high level. If you went to Chinese school, in Chinese independent school, and there was one right down Catholic high school, okay, you were regarded as a bit, why you're a bit like parochial, right? But today, a lot of the problem that we have in education is the perceived. I'm not saying it's true, but even our Prime Minister has acknowledged this at one particular time. The problem is our national education system. So you cannot address UEC alone without then addressing the national education system. So you need a whole holistic conversation on education. The UEC, we can just find the technicalities, it's not a problem. But where is that entire conversation on education as a whole? Okay? We are not having that. That's what the committee was impressing on. So in my 10,000 word report, I do come up with the solutions, and there's no consensus. Two of us agree on one thing, another one takes it. But never mind, we have court judgments also are like this sometimes. You have dissenting opinion and whatever not. But I have my chairman's evaluation of the whole issue, which is all about you cannot insulate the UEC from the broader conversation about education as a whole. Right? Because we already have a plural education system. We have private schools, we have vernacular schools, we have homeschooling, we have national schools, all kinds. So you cannot deny the plurality. We have religious schools. So you cannot deny the plurality. And I think the plurality actually is beneficial. Right? More competing ideas, the better, right? But on the national education side, they want to use authoritarian ways to come down. On the other one, our side, they're getting more weary and contemptible of everything. So there's no conversation. When actually it's very easy to have a conversation. And then, of course, the biggest thing is that everybody professes to not want to politicize education, yet as evidenced by this horrible Deputy Minister of Education, exploitative, manipulative, racialist. Everybody does just that.
They don't want a solution.
They don't want a solution. Because they can all be communal champions, you see.
That's really
I lived it. You take this person, for example. Deputy Minister of Education. How can you say one thing to the Chinese press and something else? How can you show such contempt for the committee?
Oh, you mean she was playing both sides?
Of course she was playing both sides. Right? And she's still today a deputy minister. She should have been trashed somewhere, man. And she has nothing to afford anybody. I'd say this very lantang, and you can clip it and spread it out. And all of a sudden, the DAP is shocked at what they are. I mean, no, I will say this very categorically. No Malay right group was as intrepid in this. Yeah, they say the most crazy things, of which I have responded always. Don't ever use the word khianat. Don't ever use the word, pengkhianat and all this kind of thing. That's not the language we want to use. Openly, I've said this to them. But, this going into the system and saying one thing here and divide and rule and all that, this is the mastery of this particular individual and people who use those kind of tactics. And they exist in Gerakan, they exist in MCA, Okay, but they're constantly racializing the issue.
Okay. Is that the reason why you did you leave the
No, we finished everything. But then, people, Malaysians, Malaysia muda lupa, we even forget that we had a pandemic, Somehow we have forgotten that. We finished our sessions literally on the eve, 5 days before the PH government fell. Okay, so imagine the Sheraton move, all this kind of... Anybody going to say, hey, UEC report ready? We didn't even have a Minister of Education at that time. It was Dr. Mahathir. Had taken on. And then PH government fell, and then we had COVID, lockdown and everything, right? And during that time, when you're saving lives and, people are dying here, and it's a worldwide pandemic, nobody's going to come and say, hey, UEC report ready, is it? Okay, and then by the time we had already seen how many ministers of education change, after Mahathir took over, he had other things to worry about. Then it was Radzi Jidin, I think during PN time, one of the most lesu ministers of education I think we've ever had.
What is Lesu?
Lesu is limpid. The word is limpid. Talking nonsense about, and he was asked about UEC and he said, I never received the report. Well, you never received the report because you never asked for it. And I'm a chairman of a committee. I'm not going to go to your office like a donkey and knock on your door to say, hey, the report is ready. You should be aware enough that there is a committee, there is a report. If you wanted a solution to this, you would call me. Because I deserve that kind of respect and dignity, holding this kind of office. If you think I'm going to kowtow to you, maybe you're used to that kind of thing.
And the people deserve...
Yes, yeah. But he was one of the most limpid, and then you lie, lah. You say you never received the report. Well, you never received the report because you never asked for it. So a lot of this, kind of double speak. The tongue, got about 8 tongues, all these people.
What about Fadlina now?
Fadlina has not brought it up. If you want to see it, it's ready. You give me about a month or so to go back and review everything and make sure all the editing and spelling and all that is correct. All the transcripts of the 93 interviews that we did, people's opinions, expertise, is all with the Ministry of Education. It's there. All has been transcribed and, there was a secretariat. So a lot of work was done.
Yeah.
You cannot then come and be so dismissive and, think we are one of your civil servants or something to be running around your skirt. Right?
What do you think Fadlina... Is it she
I
thinks
don't blame Fadlina. Because when Fadlina was brought into, the entire government apparatus said, we are not going to pay any attention to this, including the former Deputy Minister of Education, Teoni Cheng. So what are you now making such a big fuss? You all decided to be quiet about it. Okay? So it's only useful to you when you're desperate. I do not like our politicians.
Yeah,
I know many of them. I'm very fond of them. But there's something about the political process that makes, toyols out of them.
Yeah. You happen to do a podcast with one.
Well, I'm very honest with anything. I have not just thought this because I'm doing a podcast with him, but I think he's one of those very formidable candidates to be Prime Minister.
But you would never do a political podcast with him, would you?
If ever I did a political podcast, I do it with myself.
Yeah. Because you think that would be the most fair way to do it?
Yeah. And I love political podcasts. I love the rest is politics and things like that. But I have no qualms in saying that I think he's definitely one of the prime candidates for top office. And what we need to interrogate is how come our culture and climate and conditions and structures doesn't allow that to happen. Right? So again, in our political culture of great mediocrity, what does mediocrity do? Mediocrity just kills worth. True?
I'm sorry, I could not remember why was KJ kicked out of UMNO.
Well, I think because he was breaking party rules, or he was perceived to be breaking party rules. I think he, in campaigns, talked about wanting to be prime minister, all these kinds of things, lah. Right? So, in a culture that is increasingly besieged by phantoms, anyone perceived to be a threat is. But you know, what does that say to us about what we can actually have? Right? I have a lot of impatience, but also a lot of patience and sympathy sometimes with a lot of politicians, like our Prime Minister. I don't see what else he can do. You know, he has to be very sophisticated. All the Reformasi calls, and I was very active in Reformasi at that time. All the Reformasi calls are not very easy to see through, because there are so many contending interests. We are a very difficult country. That's why I said from the beginning, you know, don't believe solutions are easy. What we really need to do is wade into the complexity and let those complexities surface, you see. And then we need to have real quarrels. I believe in quarrel. If you don't quarrel, then you are going to fight, you know. So let it all surface, and we need to be able to wade through this long process. What is of Sabah's interest is not going to be the East Coast of Malaysia's interest. It's not going to be the West Coast of Malaysia's interest. Sarawak's interest is something totally different. What is their destiny? They believe their destiny is very different. So how does a person negotiate and navigate all of these things? You have to be very astute. You know, we cannot be a prime minister for only one constituency. That is not making excuses for anybody. I don't think in politics you make excuses, but you understand the context. I think that's hugely important. And let us put our hand on the pulse of everything. As a country, we are democratizing. That is a good thing. Okay? All the old chokeholds are gone. And of course, there will be a period of, you know, rippling and, you know, dissension. But in the end, we must be able to have the discourse to be able to bring the democracy to where it's going to be, you see. Right? And that can only come about with collective empathy. You in Bangsa, you know, for example, I was in a dinner party about a year and a half ago. Very rich lawyer, okay, living on top of Damansara Heights, you know, and he's worrying about the country, how it's going to break apart, you know, finish, you know, and this apartheid. I got my backup when he said the word apartheid. Audi, couple of BMWs, Mercedes-Benz, you know, I was...
Is it Chinese?
Does his ethnicity matter? I think his class matters more. But just for qualification, he was Indian.
Yeah.
Okay? Indian, but it's not the race. It is the class. Okay.
Sure.
In the 1980s, I was very active in anti-apartheid in university. Okay. I know what apartheid is.
The exact definition is different rights. Legal rights for
apartheid,
different race.
According to the architect of apartheid, Firster, is good neighborliness. You don't touch me, I don't touch you. Except all the wealth, privilege, power, and everything belongs to me. White people, black people, you come and serve me, and then you live 60 kilometers outside, 60 miles away, you know, in shanty towns and everything, where you have to shit in the drains because there's no sewage. Okay. And, you know, lawyer friend living on top of Damansara Heights, 1 Audi, 2 BMW, 2 Mercedes, is looking down and talking about apartheid in this country. I'm not saying we don't have major issues with race relation, equitability, and all these kind of things. But do not insult the experience of apartheid by simply borrowing that term. You understand what I'm saying?
I understand.
And you know why you're borrowing that term? Because you do not have enough intellect, a sense of history, and investment in our country's problems to be able to come up with a term of your own. You know, it's like some, you know, former bank chairman or something like that, you know, now coming and talking about how we would have all been better if we had military rule in 1971.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know.
A country and, you know, expression I think expression is very important and opinion is very important. But people forget one thing in this age of social media and those crude, awful comments you get with everything is, in a democracy, your opinion must be considered. Right? And it must carry a degree of dignity and worth.
I don't know if you're game enough to answer this. Yeah, so no doubt KJ is Prime Minister material. Do you think that...
I'm going to have to tell KJ, I went for a podcast and all we were doing is talking about KJ as Prime Minister.
We talk about loads of other things as well. Do you think that will ever materialize in your lifetime?
Let me put it this way.
He's going back.
What?
He's going back?
I have no idea. You know, when I sit, I never talk politics with him.
I'm not surprised.
But, you know, if there's... Let's put it this way. He is my chosen candidate for Prime Minister. And if there's anything I could do to make sure that he does ascend to that public office, I would do it. That's it. I'm nowhere in the circle. I'm not in anything. I'm not in... I'm, as I said, people have I think they have quite a nice view of me, and it's a view that I like, and maybe I also encourage in that, he does a lot of nice things, he riots and everything, but he's a bit mad.
Is he?
Me.
Oh, you.
Me. So, nobody kind of engages me on the intricacies of what they're doing. I think we have good relationships, but so I'm not in any kind of inner circle at all. And I like that because it was Bob Dylan who once said, one of my great heroes, always be on the outside of whatever side there is. Okay, so I like that kind of thing, but observe. But as I say, I think he's my choice for Prime Minister. I've said it very openly for years. And, if there's anything that I can contribute to make him... To see that realized, I would do it.
You known him a long time?
I don't know him well. Even now, I wouldn't say I know him well. Our families know each other well. My father and his mother, for example, were university mates. My father, of course, knew his father-in-law well, very well. They were on Rukun Negara committee and all together.
So one of
Khairi's daughter, Khairi's wife's daughter. Khairi's wife was my mother's student. She's very fond of my mum.
She follows the podcast.
Yeah, so in that sense, I suppose there's a closeness. I have a great time doing this podcast with him. And I tell you something, this is what I admire about him. I've heard about this when he was Minister of Health too. Is maybe sometimes he's perceived as having a bit of an ego. That may be true. Don't we all have egos? But when he needs to learn something, he really gets down to the ground, right? And, in his consultation with medical people, in consultation with health people, and doctors and so on, who have told me that, pandemic, pharmaceuticals, all this, sometimes even beyond our knowledge. Yeah. But this Minister of Health, he can do it. By the next morning, he can already discuss it. Okay? That kind of ability, I think it's hugely important. Yeah. And I think also as a politician, every politician comes with a sense of craft. But I think your fundamental commitment to what this country is, right, multiracial, and rooted in empathy. We need to understand each other, okay? And levels of acceptance, not even tolerance, but levels of acceptance. I think he's very committed to these things. So what more do I need to ask in a person?
Did do you think that was a factor in why he got kicked out? Him making statements about we should head towards a more multicultural...
No, I think he got kicked out because obviously he's very much in the running to be president of that party. Yeah. Even this present president of the party, he's not a racist. Right? He's not a racist. Not. I mean, he was adopted by Chinese people. Part of his adopted family are Chinese. This is what I'm emphasizing always. Our multiracialism is so real. Stop playing games with it. Okay? Jamal fellow, UMNO last time used to make all this Jamban Jamal or whatever they call him. His adopted daughter is Chinese. These are our realities, okay? And this is what makes us very different, for example, from Ku Klux Klan societies. Very, very different. Because, and especially the Malays, because there's no Malay who is pure. Somewhere along, nenek saya okay CA lah. Okay? Anak angkat kita okay Cina. Yeah. Explain to me a Penang Malay. Explain to me.
Speaks Hokkien.
Speaks Hokkien, got probably Indian blood or Turkish blood or Arab blood, somewhere along the way. Aziz Rahim, that fellow. His Tamil is flawless, man. These are not weaknesses. These are strengths. Real strengths for us. But we pretend they don't exist. Or we take it as a big joke or something. When two MPs stand up and they are having a humorous debate about a very serious thing, Chin Peng's ashes. But they're having it in Tamil. Okay? I mean, it's not an unserious thing. It's funny, it's comedy, but it's not unserious. Because, UEC, for example, we are jostling and fighting about this one language thing. Every Malaysian should be at least trilingual.
Yeah.
Yes or no?
Yes.
If you're not trilingual, what a tragedy that you don't take advantage of what this country is all about.
Okay. I don't know why I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, because we are tired.
Yeah. When did this the term Malay? When did they start? When was it created?
It's a very sensitive question.
It is.
We started using it in the 1920s. The British started using it because they needed to create a census. And in order to have a census, you have to...
1920s only.
1920s, yeah. No, the term Malay was always there. But you see, the term Malayness incarnates in so many different things. It's an anthropological term. It's a sociological term. It's an environmental term. It's a regional term. It's a historical term. It's all of these various things. It's an ethnic term. Filipinos are also Malay, by the way. Yeah, you go right down to the South Seas also, they are Malays. The Malay language then is something else. Okinawans are also Malays of some stock. So in terms of the way we understand it now, what I consider what has eventually become the political construct of Malayness, came up with something that was very practical. In the 1920s, the British realized that Malaysia was becoming very culturally complicated. So we needed to do this census to understand who the Indians were, where they live, what they do, the Chinese, this, that, and the Malays. Okay? Who the British themselves acknowledge as the Bumi Putra, the people, indigenous people of the land. But they use the overwhelming term, the Malays. Because prior to that, you didn't collectivize the Malays under one census term, because they were Banjaris, Sumatrans, orang Sumatra, and you can still find orang Jawa and all this kind of thing. But all of these people of the region, Kepulauan Melayu or Indonesian term was Nusantara, became Malays. Okay, but this was a debate that even carried on, at the time of independence. Who were really Malays? Who were, but this was, all kinds of. So it's a very, very complicated question. But really, the common term as we know it now, the term Malay into which now we come into ICs and passports and all these kind of things, was basically a 1920s phenomenon.
Yeah, what do you think about races in our forms? Because I was actually shocked because I grew up in Malaysia. Races were in forms all the time. I had a previous guest on the podcast, Alana. She's from Scotland. Converted to a Muslim living here with her husband from Kelantan also. And she said that this was one of the biggest culture shock to her, seeing races in forms. And even Vishnu mentioned before, last time Pizza Hut used to have races in their delivery forms. What do you think about
Really?
that?
This is like we were in primary school.
No, I think what started out as very functional. As a result of, again, the unfurling of politics and the relationship with politics and racial identity. has now devoured everything else. I don't see, for census purposes, such a problem with race. Of course, it makes it very difficult for a person like me, lah, because they make me choose one, you see. And due to this patrilineal bloody thing we inherit, I have to hurt my mother by saying I'm Chinese. But now I've found a way of insisting, and there are many interesting things I discovered from this. It's so much more difficult to be Malay, because when you're Malay, you have to be very precise. So when I go to IC department hall, I somehow manage to convince the lovely lady who's sitting in front of me, often having a very good time, about how elusive I am, because I look so Malay, but I'm a Chinese who cannot speak Chinese. And
you can't speak Chinese.
I can't speak Chinese. And I have Indian blood and speak Tamil pretty well. Okay? So she says, tak boleh lah saya nak dua bangsa ni, tak boleh, kena satu. So I said, janganlah macam tu, saya Cina macam mana tak boleh cakap Cina. Tapi saya India boleh cakap India. Okay? And then she will laugh. And in the end, she'll just give in. So I suppose in my IC, in terms of the formulation of numbers and things, I am Chinese lah. But at least on my form, I have put that China, India together, you see. So she can indulge me. But if I was Malay, I could never do that. I couldn't say Malay India or Malay China, right? It's just Malay. So we have that level of flexibility, which the Malays don't have. You're just this one thing, no matter what currents run through your body. So I really don't have much of a problem with it, except we grow into it, you see. We start to believe our forms. We start to believe our forms. That's the problem for me. Because the forms come up with a lot of institutional power that tells you who and what you are. If we didn't buy it, that's okay. But less and less people also are buying it. So I really don't have a problem with forms. Forms are idiotic things anyway. So my approach to forms or formalities of any of this kind is to try and have a bit of fun with it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, this one's the last one. Yeah, last year there was this incident. My Burger Lab COO Andrew Cheong tweeted reacting to the new Sharia laws in Terengganu, where there would be fines for skipping Friday prayers. Basically mentioned that Malaysia would be taken over by extremism, and we will soon be like Iran after the revolution. As someone who has a background in Islamic philosophy and is more Malay than anything else, do you think this worry is valid for any Malaysians?
Andrew Chong, right, his name?
Yes, sir.
I don't ever think he should have been sacked. But I think what he said was so unnecessary. And came from a certain kind of cultural arrogance. Somehow if a white man told you, on this day you cannot do this, you would accept it very, 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 very willingly. And even adulate it as such a progressive thing maybe. This happens in Kelantan during Friday prayers. Everything shuts down. Everybody follows lah. What's the big deal, right? I'm not saying it's good or bad, but when you enter a culture again is organic, right? So try and be as chameleon-like as possible, because that's how we work. Malaysians. I tell you why Malaysians are very good wherever they go. You could end up in Mexico. You could end up in Peru. You could end up in Japan. You're somehow able to... Culture shock is very rare for Malaysians. Or if you do, then I don't know what kind of Malaysian you are. Maybe very top elite kind of Malaysian, okay? Or you end up in the United States where, the moment you come out of the airport, the taxi guy, hey, hello, ¿cómo está? Okay, because they think you're a Mexican wetback. Or if you look like me, no problem. Same if you go into Kelantan and Terengganu. I understand maybe what Andrew Chong is worried about. It's also what I worry about. It's this institutional edicts, you see. You give institutions this amount of power to regulate your lives. So articulate like that or very intelligently, or write an article to the newspaper, rather than going on your TikTok or whatever and making some idiotic comment about Taliban and Iran You've never been to Iran. I have. It's not as difficult as people think it is. Not easy, but it's not as difficult as people think it is. Rushing to all those kinds of caricatures. Why? If you have concerns, deliberate on it, gain the necessary knowledge, maybe write to a newspaper of what your concerns are. But that's just asking too much these days.
Yeah.
Right? Because you do have this funny kind of compulsion, a soul twitch. I think people these days are just responding to their soul twitches a lot. Before it actually filters through anything, you have to put it out on TikTok. Now, this gives me an opportunity to say something about collective culture and the way we speak and express opinion today. How does the world arrive at a place where we take something called TikTok seriously? What are we going to invent next? Yo-yo? Right? Anybody who approaches the problems of the world in 33 seconds, first of all, is reductive and has to be something of a Stone Age person.
Well said. Okay, we'll wrap up now.
Thank you so much, Brian. It was really a lot of fun. But, I really feel like we are in, like Hanuman, like leaping over to Lanka. So, I don't know what you're going to do with this, but...
No, unless there's something that you don't want me to put in, I'll put it.
I'm open with everything.
I'll put in everything because I believe people will enjoy this sort of conversations. And I think maybe if you've seen some of my previous episodes, right, we jump around way more than this. And there's most of the time I don't prepare anything. I just talk. Yeah, so this was actually quite structured to me. Very structured, actually.
I had a good time. It was really wonderful.
But the reason why I structured it because I was really looking forward, and honestly, I have to be blessed to be able to speak to someone like you. Actually, really, really enjoy listening to you talk, and you should do it more. Yeah. Hope to see you on more other podcasts.
Well, thanks for having me. It was a really wonderful session. Thank you, Vishnu. I just love your name. It's incredible.
Yeah. Okay. All right, guys. That's it for today's episode. We've got Eddin Khoo on the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do me a simple favor: hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, suggestions on who you want to see in future podcast episode, what you thought about today's podcast episode, and give it up for Eddin Khoo, guys.
Thank you.
My homies, I'm missing my oldies, my brothers, my cronies. We all went to court, but before only courts that we knew were the ones where we were shooting three, selling Kobe. To a legend, rest in peace to the old me, rest in peace to my brothers, rest in peace to my whole team. The oldest, I'm missing my shawty.